Well, welcome back to J. Tyler Music, although today again it's not going to be music, it's going to be a little, a little talk about fake news. Let me tell you this, fake news is all news is either fake news or it's contrived news, meaning somebody wants to get their agenda out to you to brainwash you. So it's either fake or contrived. What are we going to do? We all know that you cannot trust any news outlet now. I don't care if it's Fox News because they're slanted toward Trump, or whether it's the New York Times, which is biased against Trump. It's all fake or contrived news. Now let me go on with my little story here. Headline: Donald Trump's ties with Russia revealed to the FBI. All fake news. That was a headline in early January. In the appearance of impropriety on Trump's part, commanded that the news cycle for the whole week be delegated to that story. Fake news, proven to be fake. Most news is, as Donald Trump has suggested over and over again at his rallies, dishonest. He used to point out there, both fingers. Look at it, you see them out there? They're all dishonest. They're all crooked media. He's right. Unfortunately, he's right. Now, the mainstream news media is hell-bent on preventing Donald Trump from becoming the president, just as they were hell-bent on thwarting Mitt Romney's attempt or John McCain's attempt at becoming president. You saw it, totally biased. So what's the reason behind the mainstream media's constant attack against anyone who opposes their liberal, progressive agenda? Good question, right? The media controls what your mind will believe. Hollywood controls what your mind will believe. The media and Hollywood are what I call progressives. I've got other videos that explain what progressives are, so go there if you need to know. You think a progressive is just like Hillary Clinton was progressive, in the word progressive they chose, meaning, well, we're going to move forward, we're going to progress instead of regress. No, progressives have a totally different agenda, almost bordering worse than communism. But that's another story for another day. But the media wants to know, they already know that if they continuously put out fake or contrived news, then they control your mind and my mind, although we've become smarter than this. So if they continuously brainwash you over time, then they can control the narratives that they want you to believe. Sort of like the progressive teachers and professors do in public schools, colleges, and universities. They've done this for the past 20 years, progressive, liberal, progressive teachers and professors. If you don't believe that, then take a look at your kids who went to college lately, called millennials, and they all believe that socialism is the right form of government. Well, they were taught that in public schools and colleges. That's why they all flocked out to vote for and get behind Bernie Sanders. But the press didn't want Bernie Sanders to be the leader either, so they in the Clinton conglomerate, if you would, because it's huge, and the media made Bernie Sanders really look like a fool. So he was wiped out early on, and then, but I think he intended to join the Hillary campaign before he even ran. But that's another story. Ever notice that the TV newscasters seem to repeat the same stories? If you haven't, let me just play this short clip for you, and then I'll be right back and we can discuss this a little more in detail. But watch this first and it will convince you that somehow a common source feeds the news media outlets. Watch this. So there must be a single source where the mainstream media outlets get their marching orders to brainwash us, right? Right. So let's take a look at that source, shall we? The source of almost all news, whether your local regional newspaper or your local TV news, comes from one source called the AP or the Associated Press. Well, I check, and you should too, the AP. When I get my cell phone out in the morning, I log right in, apnews.org, whatever, and I get the AP headlines, because if I get the AP headlines, I now know what ABC News, NBC News, Fox News, New York Times, Boston Globe, whatever, I know, USA Today, I know what they're going to talk about. It comes from the AP. Let me get into that a little more to educate you as far as what that's all about. So I check that, all the news, and I find out what they're going to be preaching that day. And sure enough, if I go to ABC or NBC, which I do, or Fox, there's the same stuff, the same headlines I saw that the AP comes up with at about 1:15 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. So it might be interesting to note, by the way, that the Associated Press came into existence as a result of the telegraph, way back in our past. The telegraph, the tele. This was where we now get the phrase, what's on the wire? That's what they used to do, is they'd telegraph news into the AP. 5 newspapers formed the AP back in 1846 in New York. What happens is they shared, the 5 major newspapers shared headlines with this one conglomerate that they formed called the Associated Press. Just 5, that's it. And the reporters back in 1846, they didn't have a cell phone or any of that kind of stuff. They certainly didn't have the internet, so they would correspond by telegraph. Telegraph operators would click away as news stories began to form by the reporters of these 5 newspapers who formed this Associated Press. Now today, the AP is a cooperative with over 1,500 newspaper contributors and other outlets, untold TV outlets. Now, however, the AP charges their members a fee for taking their own news in and sharing it with the other members. Can you imagine? They charge them money. If I'm the Boston Globe and I have a hot story, Boston Marathon bombing, and I get it on the telegraph, and I send it to the AP, then they share that with ABC, NBC, Fox News, everybody else. All the other outlets get the story from the AP. But I'm the Boston Globe, I shared that story, and now I have to pay the AP for my own story? Yes! Ridiculous, eh? But that's going to come into play in just a moment when you see what else I have to say. Now the AP big shots, that is the managing editors, take what they feel are the headlines of the day, and then they word it so that the outcome becomes what they want you to know in your mind for that day. They put out the stories via the internet or wire feeds into the cooperative managing editors. And then this is how fake news occurs. It's really quite simple. A blogger, let's say BuzzFeed, you've probably heard of them in the news, but they contrive a fake story. Contrive, they make it up. A fake story such as the Donald Trump scandal that turned out not to be a scandal, but turned out to be totally fake. So let's say a reporter from a recognized news outlet, let's say the New York Times, which actually happened, that reporter wants to get, 15 minutes of fame, so he somehow taps into the BuzzFeed blogger and reads this story. Now he wants to jump on this thing before everybody gets on it, right? He doesn't take time to see if that thing is true. He just prints it in the New York Times. So he prints the fake story, doesn't know it's fake yet, but he thinks he's got some kind of a lead. And that's how they get paid, and that's how they get their recognition. Joe Blow came up with this terrific Trump scandal. And so he would get the accolades from that. Well, didn't turn out that way for him. But let's say the reporter who works for the New York Times prints the story, and that story finds its way back from the New York Times into the AP. Then the AP writes a version of that story, or fake news, without researching it and without finding out if it has any merit whatsoever. Usually you hear this from a reporter. An anonymous source has told this reporter this story. Anonymous source. Anonymous means I picked it out of the air, pretty much. So Trump is compromised by Russian affiliations, and the story is accepted as gospel truth, which it wasn't. If it had not come from a contributing member of the New York Times, for example, it never would have made it up to the AP, never would have gotten disseminated out to all the other 1,500 outlets. So that's how fake news starts. Other news that gets up into the AP may start with a managing editor of a major newspaper. Let's say the Boston Globe editor-in-chief comes up with a story. Maybe he got it from Elizabeth Warren, the senator in Massachusetts, who's totally liberal and progressive. And she's talking about who else? Donald Trump. So the reporter who's covering Elizabeth Warren starts writing down the story from her, and because she's a senator, he accepts or she accepts that story as being legit. The goal of these progressives, editors-in-chief, if you will, is really to thwart every move that Donald Trump makes and every sentence he speaks or tweets. They lost the election of Hillary Clinton, and they actually can't cope. They don't know how to fix it. The loss was so shocking to them and unbearable to the liberal progressive movement because their agenda of brainwashing you and me, the American public, with stories and social agenda stuff came crashing to a flaming end when Trump became elected as the 45th president. To overcome, the progressives must use their media to make Trump go away. I don't know how they do it, but every story that you see now is Trump is no good because of this, or Trump's got some bad ties with Russia, or Trump's record keeping is horrible, or he has an ethics problem with doing business as the President of the United States, blah, blah, blah. Whatever it is, they're trying to thwart every move because they want to get their power back. If they can't prevent him from being president, believe me, you've seen the headlines. They want to screw up everything going into even the inauguration. Try saying that a couple of times. But the public figured it all out, and the majority ended up voting for Trump. I know I did, and I know I would read the news or see it on TV, and I'd say, how can they be this slanted? The news outlets are what really drove me to go and vote for Trump in the first place. He's the guy that said, look at these people out there, they're fake, they're bad, they're evil. He was telling me the truth because I saw it with my own eyes. Same with Fox, though. I don't want to let them off the hook. You know, you get guys out there like Shepard Smith, who I can't stand personally, but Shepard Smith is out there bad-mouthing Trump every which way but loose. Megyn Kelly, who is now going to work for somebody, MSNBC or some stupid, channel. She did the same thing. She would hammer John McCain or some, good guys. Just hammer them. And other ones are in bed with Trump, like, what's his name, Sean Hannity. Well, we all know that. So you can't get decent, good, faithful journalistic news from anybody anymore. We all know that. We figured it out. We know that the news media is utterly biased against Donald Trump. So now most of us don't believe a solitary word that comes out of their mouth. Whether the New York Times or, like I said, Fox News, who are Trumpers for the most part. Some Americans, especially the millennial generation, the young kids between 22 and 35, I guess, they seem to get their news from the internet. They read articles that appear in their internet news feed on Facebook or on YouTube. Some even believe that whatever Bill Maher or Jon Stewart of The Daily Show said was legitimate news. Well, Jon Stewart admitted a million times over that he used fake news to get his audience's attention, and it worked. So it has recently become evident that no matter where we get our news, we can't tell if the story is fake or contrived to support a social agenda of the progressives, or if it's true. We just don't know. We have no idea. Many people have stopped watching TV news altogether. I mean, I don't pay attention to it other than to get the weather report for my area. Other than that, everything they tell me, I mean, if there's a house fire at 777 Melrose, I get it. That's true. That's journalistic. That's not biased. But when they get into the politics of the day, you can tell it's slanted. Anyway, and most people don't buy newspapers anymore for two reasons, really. You can't trust what you're going to read. And number two is the stories in the newspapers, that's yesterday's news. I mean, I've already seen the news that they're going to come out with later this afternoon. I've already seen it this morning on either TV or on my internet feed, you know, the AP, where I check it out every day. So TV news would jump on the story that some newspaper fed up to them, and they would disseminate that throughout all of their 1,500 cooperatives in the AP. Facebook my news feed on Facebook, I already have the news. So from whatever the Boston Globe or, the Charlotte Observer, which I live in North Carolina now, used to live in Boston or Boston area. But anyway, whatever that newspaper come up with, Attleboro Sun Chronicle, local town thing, whatever they come up with today is already yesterday's news. So why would I buy a newspaper? I wouldn't. The newspapers, in my opinion, are on the slippery slope toward where the dinosaurs went. They're going to be gone soon. So where in the future will all our news come from? And who can we trust to actually deliver a journalistic truth? Who? Glad you asked. Let's talk about it. It seems that maybe a governmental action like Congress is needed, and that may very well become the mandate for truth in journalism. It might happen that one source will become the dominant, trustworthy news outlet. When we find a source like on the internet, which is probably where it will be, or cable, that can be trusted to deliver pure, unadulterated journalism, we'll go there. And the word will spread quickly throughout social media. Hey, go over here. Believe me, go over to XYZ News, because they seem to have real journalism over there on that channel. And when the news gets out and it spreads like wildfire on social media, we all know, they call it trending, or they say, the thing went viral, whatever. That's how quickly news spreads. So I'm telling you that in the near future, that's what's going to happen. Congress could assist, by the way, by having a truth squad peruse the lead stories of the day, where the AP sends it up, but it could be the AP will be replaced by another conglomerate, and I'll tell you about that in a second. That may happen sooner than you think. And what happens is, where any fake news comes into that congressional truth squad, and they find out it's fake news, then they ought to be fining that originator of the fake news, or their newspaper or their TV outlet. Fine them a huge fine so that you can eliminate at least having fake news out there, or outright lying news like BuzzFeed came up with. So what do I personally think will happen in the very near future? This: newspapers are sick and tired of paying the heavy fees to the AP to send their own stories back to them for a fee. It's unbelievable, and they think so too. So what they may decide to do is form another alliance and forget the AP totally. A news network could be established for members only, where the managing editor of the Boston Globe logs into a particular secure website, and there are the headlines from the New York Times or the Detroit News or LA Times or whatever, and he can pick out and choose what he wants to put in his newspaper, or the TV media outlets who do the same thing. But they just log in, it's free, they're all members, and they're all contributing into that national database, if you will. Everybody wins at that point, but it doesn't eliminate fake news. It eliminates high fees, though. A legitimate internet news channel will become the honest news network of the future. I'm telling you. Maybe they'll name it HNN, like CNN. HNN for Honest News Network. Now, once people see that the HNN always delivers unbiased, truthful news to them, they will continue to view that channel, and advertisers will flock to that outlet and probably suspend their ads from the other fake news outlets. So when the fake news outlets begin losing ad revenue, which is their bloodstream, then they may get the idea, well, we better start doing absolutely truthful journalism. That'd be a switch. They had it like 50 years ago, but not now. This is what is needed right now. This is what we have to do. When will this happen? Well, perhaps sooner if you decide to post this video on your Facebook or Twitter or Instagram pages, because some really rich entrepreneur may see it and decide to start his or her own HNN channel. Then, if well advertised and the news is found to be always legit, we'll all end up there. Who can say, right? So, with that, I will leave you. We'll get into another speech or tutorial or song or something in the near future here at J. Tyler Music. Thanks for stopping by, and I really appreciate it. But don't forget, hit that subscribe button. If you hit that subscribe now button, you're automatically subscribed. Thank you very much for your support. I'll see you at some point in the future.